Before we come to forward to receive the communion, just want to share a few things with you as my meditation about the new covenant. This is not something new. We know about what is Monday, Thursday. We know what is Good Friday. And we know that we are getting ready for the Easter Sunday. Nothing is new. It's tradition. We know it. As long as we start to be aware of who we are as Christians, we understand what Easter is. So on one hand, we're just keeping the tradition. We're just moving. We're just doing that as every year we have to celebrate that something we call Christmas, something we call Easter. But is there any power just in celebrating or keeping the tradition? On one hand, keeping the tradition is very important. But on the other hand, if you just keep tradition, you created another God against God. Because the tradition itself that we are doing today was not a tradition 2,000 years ago. If actually tradition was there when Christ was doing his meal, he was celebrating not our communion today. He was not in the church in Minnesota. He was sitting in a Jewish family celebrating a fully Jewish meal. He's acting as a Jew. He's among his body who are Jewish, dressed like a Jewish, talks like Jewish, laugh like Jewish, do the jokes like everything. That's what they were doing. But because the church took the tradition and put something new, so the covenant always there. There is something. God always works with people. So when you talk about Passover, where the Passover came from? It came as a sign when the Lord told them that you are a slave in Egypt. After hundreds of years being a slave in Egypt, do not forget the day you get to the land, you celebrate your new beginning. You say goodbye to the old life, the scary, bad life that you had in Egypt. And you start the Passover. So big 3 Jewish celebrations, 3 big festivals, and one of them is the Passover. To remember who crossed you from the sea, from one side to the other side over the sea. Who took your hand and held you. Who moved you and changed you from your category of being a slave to being a free. From owning nothing to the promised land. So this is, even the covenant was the Passover as a Jew start there. And then they keep that every year. So this year, this bunch of Jewish people, they have no idea, maybe except Christ, is the one, he has idea about what's going to be in the future. But none of his disciples has any idea. They were good Jewish people. Their biggest dream was just, let's try to move this water, still water that's not moving. Let's try, hopefully, that we can stir something to make like a revolution in our country and make our corrupted religious leader be aware of something. That's what their extremist dream as disciples. They have no idea this one is going to be Peter, the one that's going to be claimed, and Paul and Mark and all of these big guys. They had no idea in the moment what God was doing in their life. They were normal human beings like you and me. The only person who can be aware of what is and what is going to be was Christ. This is a bunch of people. They are just, when you look at the scene around the Passover scene, it's a very sad story. I don't know what are we going to celebrate about. It's a bunch of people that one is going to betray him, one is going to sell him, and the other one, everyone is waiting. Who's going to be on the right hand and the left hand? Who's going to take the most of the privilege of being close to Christ? And this guy that he looks like the boss, he's going to be the sacrifice. He's going to be thrown under the bus. The guy that's, if you think of them like you go and enter into the scene and they look like a bunch of good people. They're so warm and they're eating and laughing and looks like a nice gathering. As we always see this many ancient, very famous European icons with the Christ sitting at the table and the disciples are surrounding them. We made this, but this is not really the true story. What's happened there is everybody coming to the table with their own dream, with their own benefit, with their own idea. no one was really thinking about God's mission except Christ. Everybody comes to the scene with their own personal interest. And Christ is simply saying that you started a tradition of Passover 1,000 years ago, and this is going to be a new covenant. What I'm going to trying to say to you today that God always works in people's life regardless. As Christian, we took the Passover, we moved it to something that we became a communion, and we have it as one of the big pillars of our faith as Christian all over different denominations. But really we did not invent it. It was already there as something we call the Passover. So God always used something that's already existent, as the Passover was the blessing for the Jew, a reminder for the Jew to remember where they came from and where God led them. The same thing, we took it and we add our own interpretation and theology and understanding. We are not celebrating being out of Egypt. Yes, Egypt could be metaphorically any place of slavery, any place that can control us. But we are not a Jew. We cannot talk about the real slavery, but we can talk about spiritual slavery. So for us, as we come to this moment today, on one hand, we are keeping tradition, but on the other hand, know that God works through the tradition. Any tradition, worship, just when He asks, why are you doing that? Because we have to keep doing that. Then the tradition itself became useless and became a tool to control you. It's very good to keep tradition to remind ourselves who we are and where we came from. But the more powerful is to understand that God is working with the tradition to make something new. For a Jew, it's a Passover celebration, period. For a Christian, it is a Passover / new covenant, the new beginning of my faith as Christian. As now, I do not have to be a Jew by flesh and blood to be accepted in God. Now, through Christ, all of us are accepted. All of us can be related to this new covenant. So we are here to celebrate the tradition. We are not slaved by the tradition. We are here to understand that God used even more traditional things in our life to work and to make something new and create a new covenant. So I hope that through this, as we come here in a very short time to meet together, to celebrate and listen to what God is saying to you today, say how to make this Holy Week and preparation for Easter is a real resurrection for you from your weakness, from your fears, from all the things that's pulling you back and push you under. This is what's resurrection for me as a person who lives in this context that we are living in today. So Easter is not something just a fantasy. Easter is about you and me. It's about Christ being among human beings who could be good to Him sometimes, but they could be awful to Him many times. They could one day celebrate Him as we did on Palm Sunday, but in the other days, one is going to sell Him and one is going to betray Him. And going to be run away, and only a bunch of women they are going to be next to the cross. And none of these men who think of their masculine as being man is going to be next to the cross. All of them going to run and be afraid. So Christ is saying that I am here with you in your pain, in your suffering, in your good moments, in your difficult moments. This is a time not just only to celebrate tradition, but to add a new chapter in our life. Amen. As we begin to